Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back for another episode of Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have the most transparent president in history. Donald Trump dramatically kicks press out of governor's meeting with forward order from MSN.com, posted by Ragnar OKXG. And yeah, personally, I don't think Donald Trump should be kicking the press out of any meetings if the press wants to come into. But regardless, Reddit only doesn't care for it because he's in the out group rather than the in group. I'm sure if Joe Biden did the exact same thing, Joe Biden as on a whole was far less transparent, I would say, than Donald Trump's been as president. But, Reddit always made excuses whenever it came to Joe Biden not being transparent, but suddenly the orange man's not transparent, and it's the worst thing ever. It just goes to show you, Reddit has no values other than in-group good, out-group bad, and that's my thoughts there. Next we have your tax dollars fund the NGOs that bring the immigrants to the USA, posted by Amogus Devilman, and that's a cross post from the anarcho-capitalism subreddit, and that looks like a screenshot of some tweets. A tweet from the Observer. The first one is of the Observer. Americans get nothing, but foreigners get to be resettled at our expense into our neighborhoods, have organizations that set up and double their bank accounts. Is that right? And the GOP just funded all of this on over $5 billion. And then another guy replied, Kelly Leak replied, list of NGOs involved, and linked to a page of individual development accounts grant from acf.gov. And then they have, I guess more from him. Employer engagement program (EEP). The employer engagement program (EEP) partners with local employers and community partners to support the success of refugee employees and build inclusive workplaces. EEP helps employers create career advancement pathways through implementing on-site learning and dip skills training in connection to the job ready English program, and it provides work-based ESL training. Some of the programs can even help immigrants get their CDLs. Just view the program recipients, and they link a bunch of links to, I guess, who's getting that money. They have Stardust tweet. Imagine if Americans got this kind of help. Not only did they get the financial training and matching funds they got set up with employment, participants receive basic, advanced, and specialized financial literacy training tailored to their savings goals. Through match savings, clients can work toward assets such as vehicle, home, rental, support, or education-related expenses. And they have another tweet from Stardust from 2023 findings, which is the last year an annual report is available. This is astonishing. If I'm reading this correctly, a third of them owned a home after 4 years in the U.S. How does this happen? Refugee home ownership increased with the time in the U.S. Just 7% of refugees who arrived in fiscal year 2022 owned a home, while 31% of refugees who arrived between fiscal year 2018 and fiscal year 2018 reporting on their own home. And then one final tweet from Evil Texas tweeted, so they use the refugee resettlement program, spent $100,000 on each of the one they bring here, and then they give them a dollar for dollar match when they get here. Why am I paying the taxes? And then the OP ad, it's been said before, but bears repeating, especially young people facing precarity and austerity in today's tough economic times. This country has untold wealth, even in our current diminished capacity. We live as we live, despite feeding, clothing, housing, and providing for hundreds of millions of people who are hot or not our citizens, and many of us do not even live on this continent, and who do not even live on this continent. Those that do manage to swindle their way into the country have essentially every need and want pride at the taxpayer's expense. Every time you get passed over for promotion, every pink slip, every lackluster raise or no raise at all, every we read your application letter from work or school, every rent increase, tax increase, special aid from a country or city, and every single price increase due to inflation is the result of wealth transfer from American citizens to foreigners. They are taking food from you and your children's mouths and giving it to Somalis, then they think it's funny. And I guess I would agree with all that. Reddit, of course, would probably think this is the greatest thing ever because, when the government funds money to outgroup organizations like Turning Point, as we talked about yesterday with the Turning Point, or I think it was last episode, we know what the Turning Point Arizona license plate, Reddit thought that was the worst thing ever. But when the government funnels money to groups that they like immigrants and progressive NGOs, suddenly, it's a good thing, and you should like it. And it just goes to show you that, the government's naturally just going to funnel money to whatever groups, who's ever in the in-group, regardless of who that may be. But of course, Reddit, whenever it's a left-leaning group, like an immigration group, or an LGBTQ+, whatever other letters they've added as well group, Reddit will say it's entirely justified that taxpayer money goes there, even if it might be a private company, I'm sure if it's a conservative group, Reddit will think it's the worst thing ever. It just goes to show you they have no standards, no values, only teams. They want all their money going to the woke progressive causes. And, personally, I think if we had voluntary taxation, they wanted to voluntarily pay taxes and send and earmark them for woke progressive causes like immigration or LGBTQ, whatever other letters they've added as well. I think they should be able to. But right now, forced taxation and people not being able to determine where their money goes to, I think the problem is that a lot of people don't want their money going to the immigrants, and especially some who might be illegal immigrants. But right now the government can just throw money at wherever it wants to, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next, we have Judge Eileen Cannon bars the release of special counsel report on Trump's handling of classified documents from CNN.com, posted by Ninja Lover, another fail for transparency. And yeah, personally, if she wants to block the report, I think she should be able to if she has the right to do that. As I said previously, Reddit hates loves transparency when. Or they want Trump to be as transparent as possible, even though he's arguably more transparent than Biden ever was. But whenever Biden wasn't transparent, they always had an excuse, and that's just very much how Reddit works. Pretty much all social media works like that, but Reddit in particular is very bad thanks to the upvote system. And. If I'm sure if this was a judge blocking documents related to Joe Biden, Reddit will think it's entirely justified. But since it's blocking documents related to a case on the Orange Man, Reddit thinks it's the worst thing ever. Next, we have taxes are not theft. Taxes are HOA dues on inherited property, posted by Baton13. They said, I constantly refrain from self-proclaimed libertarians that taxes are theft. Given those taxes are then used to provide you with services, that seems like a flawed analogy at best. Where are the services in this context? Forced gifts from a person who robbed you. A better analogy is the taxes are like the HOA dues you're saddled with after inheriting your house from your parents. You receive services in return, but they may not be the ones you don't want. You still on the hook to pay them, but only so long as you choose to retain the house, your citizenship. If you want direct input into the specific services purchased and provided you by the HOA board, you can go talk to the current HOA board members to try to talk sense with them to them. Alternatively, you can run for the HOA board so you can are making those decisions for you and your neighbors. As a final solution, as mentioned before, you can get rid of the house and its associated obligations and walk away from the whole mess. I'll take any constructive comments you have and try to reply directly to them all. And my thoughts on that are, I would say that taxes are theft. You can make the argument that they're kind of like HOA dues, but, I would say HOAs are kind of authoritarian as well, even if they may be private, because, private authoritarians can be a problem as well. I think if people want to have an HOA and want to voluntarily join an HOA, they should be able to, but I don't think they should be forced to join an HOA if they don't want to, If they buy a house in an area that has an HOA, they should definitely know that there's an HOA there if they would be forced to join it. And also, I think another thing is that when it comes to taxes or theft, the OP here makes the point, they're going to services that could help you. I think that's why we need voluntary taxation first and foremost, because right now you don't really know where your taxpayers' dollars are going. They could be going to Israel, they could be going to Ukraine, they could be going to illegal immigrants, they could be going to the LGBTQ plus whatever other letters they've added as well community. And I think that's very much the big problem I have with taxation, is that you don't know where your taxpayer dollars are going. Even if we did still keep forced taxation, at the very least, people should be able to spend their taxpayer dollars. They should be able to earmark their taxpayer dollars for what they want to spend them for. And I think that should be a much more popular thing than it currently is. That line of rhetoric, I would say. If you want to spend your taxpayer dollars wherever, you send them to wherever you want to. But right now, you don't get to determine where you send them. And I think that's important when it comes to the notion that taxes are theft, because right now the government can spend your taxpayer dollars on whatever bullshit it wants to, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. Next, we have Trump's new tariffs are probably illegal too, from Reason.com, posted by Jedi Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for Trump's tariffs, but ultimately the law is whatever those in charge say it is, and a lot of people are going to defer to whatever the president says. So, ultimately, if he wants to say to make any tariffs he wants to, it doesn't really matter on the status of their legality. What matters is what people are willing to justify. If they might be technically illegal based on what's written in the books, that's fine. But, ultimately, laws are just that words written down on a piece of paper. What matters is how they're enforced. And if the people who have the monopoly on state use of force are willing to enforce Trump's new tariffs, even if they might technically go against the law, that's ultimately how the law works. And that's my thoughts there. Then we have red siren emoji. Trump just announced $2,000 tariff dividend without Congress approval. President Trump says he plans to send 2,000 tariff dividend payments directly to middle-class Americans, declaring he will move forward without congressional approval. Posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's a cross post from the In Bitcoin We Trust subreddit. And I guess this is a clip of Trump saying that on Fox News. And yeah, personally, I think if Trump does want to give Americans a $2,000 tariff dividend, as I said, you don't really get to determine where your taxpayer dollars go to. Personally, I do think it as a tariff dividend, sounds like it's. I don't think that the government should be giving people money. It's kind of like buying votes. But ultimately, Trump can throw money at whatever he wants to, and if he wants to give Americans a $2,000 tariff dividend, I don't think he's doing it for an ethical reason. I really don't care for tariffs, but $2,000 is $2,000, so I'd probably take it. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, in less than a year, Trump erased 12 years of solvency for the trust fund that pays for Medicare Part A from Fortune.com, posted by Woke Boogeyman, and that's cross-post from the economics subreddit. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for that. But of course, when Republicans spend money, Trump, Reddit's always calling me out on it, but Democrats are arguably even bigger spenders than Republicans, and Reddit always downplays that. I'm sure that if Joe Biden did this exact same thing and erased all that solvency from that trust fund, Reddit would find justification for it. But since it's the bad orange man, Reddit thinks it's the worst thing ever. Next we have Protest the State of the Union, posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's cross-post from the 5051 subreddit. And that looks like a tweet or Blue Sky School or Facebook post or whatever from Alt National Park Service. Tonight is the full boycott of the State of the Union. If there's one thing Trump can't stand, it's low ratings. Move on and Midas Touch announces the People's State of the Union rally at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time near the Capitol in the National Mall. And yeah, personally, if people want to boycott the National Union, the State of the Union, I think they should be able to, boycott whatever you want to. No, ultimately, I don't really care for the state of the propaganda, regardless of which uniparty figurehead is in the White House. Maybe if Thomas Massie got in there and did one, but I think if Thomas Massie ever did get elected president, there's no way he's going to survive to his first State of the Union. They'll definitely try and off him before then. And yeah, so personally, I don't really care for the State of the Union. It's really just the president jerking himself off. Bill Maher did a good segment on it recently on his show. I don't really care for a lot of legacy media, but Bill Maher's probably one of the few decent ones. I disagree vehemently with him on Israel, but he definitely is good on a lot of stuff. And I think the State of the Union really should be done away with and go back to how it was back from Jefferson to Taft. It was just a letter to Congress instead of some big pompous speech, and I think that's what we'd be better off with something like that rather than for something for the president to jerk himself off and talk about how great he is. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have Justice Department withheld and removed some Epstein files related to Trump from NPR.org, posted by Ninja Lover, and they added, the Justice Department has withheld some Epstein files related to allegations that President Trump sexually abused a minor, and NPR investigation finds. It also removed some documents from public database where accusations against Jeffrey Epstein are also mentioned Trump. And yeah, this is a big part of why I don't really care for I care about the Epstein files, but Reddit only cares about the Epstein files in relation because the Orange Man's in them. If the Orange Man wasn't in them, Reddit would be downplaying them as much as possible, and that's why I like what Kana and Ro and Thomas Massie, the two representatives really pushed the Epstein files release. They didn't really push Trump and Clinton in it, wherever they just wanted to hold accountability for victims. But Reddit only cares that Trump's in it, just like how a lot of right-wing people only clear that Bill Clinton's in them. And it just goes to show you that, people, even though that both branches of the Uniparty have people in the Epstein files, and that, it's a big club and in it, people will still find a way to divide themselves over partisan issues, even if they shouldn't be doing that. And that just goes to show you that I hope all the Epstein classes held accountable, but Reddit doesn't really care about the Epstein class being held accountable outside of the Orange Man. Really, maybe Bill Clinton on occasion, but really all they care about is the Orange Man. And that just goes to show you that if you want to hyperfixate on Donald Trump 24/7 for over a decade, you should be able to. But eventually your politics should try and go beyond the Orange Man as well, and that's doesn't seem like it's possible for most writers currently. They only think in terms of the Orange Man and nothing besides the Orange Man. Next we have Trump can't filibuster through the 6-year itch from Reason.com, posted by Jedi Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't know if it's going to be a 6-year itch because Trump wasn't in power for has been in power for 6 consecutive years. He has been in power for 6 years total, but he did. It's the non-consecutive terms because the Biden was in power for those 4 years in between the first term and the second term. So ultimately, I guess we'll have to wait and see if the 6-year itch happens and the Democrats win big in the midterms. Regardless of how much the Democrats win in the midterms, I don't think it really matters. It probably still won't be good enough for Reddit that that the Congress isn't going to be entirely made up of Democrats. If it was up to Reddit, we'd have 435 Democrat representatives and 100 Democrat senators, and any dissent against the Democratic Party law would be illegal because that's very much how Reddit works these days. It's very much a DNC propaganda website. And I remember I made a comment on the videos subreddit. And it was from John Oliver's show on Monday. He did a segment on Twitter, and one guy in the top comment said, what's one of the top comments said, it's not illegal in the UK. I guess he's just saying Twitter is now a propaganda arm of the Republican Party, 104 upvotes. And I said, I said, where is it? Here it is. I said, Reddit is clearly a propaganda arm of the Democratic Party, but John Oliver would never do a segment on it, and I got 44 downvotes. And that's very much how Reddit works. You can say anything bad you want about the Republican Party or Donald Trump or any Republican, but the second you start talking smack about the Democratic Party, unless it's one that they've already ruled to be outgroup and in-group like John Fetterman, suddenly, it's downvote city for you. And that's very much how, if you want to use social media, produce social media propaganda, you should be able to. But at some point, you gotta get skeptical when all the things are just Republicans bad, Democrats good, and that's important to remember. I think Republicans and Democrats are far more of a uniparty than they'd like people to think. But Reddit, they always buy the narrative of the lesser of two evils. The only criticism they'll ever have of the Democratic Party is it's never progressive enough. But, they'd still vote for a dead guy over a Green Party candidate if he had a G next to his name. That's very much how Reddit works. It's very much fake leftists. It seems like there's some genuine leftists on Reddit. But a lot of them are just DNC shills who would vote for anything if it had a Democrat, if it had a D next to its name, and that's important to I think they care much more about the letter next to the name than if someone is alive or a human or anything. They vote for anything if it had a D next to its name. They vote for a bottle of water if it had a D next to its name. They vote for a stick if it had a D next to its name. They vote for a deer corpse if it had a D next to its name, and that's very much how it works. I'm not gonna say there aren't people like that when it comes to the Republican Party as well, but it definitely seems to be much more a problem on Reddit, especially the vote for the vote blue no matter who people, which seems to make up the vast majority of Reddit. And that's my thoughts on that issue. So I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.